Have you ever wondered if miracles still happen in a world that seems to have forgotten how to hope? In the frozen streets of downtown Chicago, where steam rises from manholes like prayers to an indifferent sky, two souls were about to collide in a way that would shatter everything they thought they knew about faith, sacrifice, and the invisible threads that bind us all together. The December wind cut through the city like a blade, carrying with it the scent of exhaust fumes and broken dreams. Veterans Affairs Hospital stood like a concrete monument to forgotten wars, its windows glowing amber against the gray twilight. Inside, Staff Sergeant Michael Torres sat beside a hospital bed that had become both sanctuary and prison for his 7-year-old daughter, Sophia. For 8 months, leukemia had been slowly stealing pieces of his little girl. The doctors spoke in careful, measured tones about treatment protocols and survival rates, but Michael heard only the spaces between their words, the quiet admissions of helplessness wrapped in medical terminology. Sophia's once bright eyes now seemed too large for her pale face, and her laughter, when it came at all, sounded fragile as winter glass. "Daddy, tell me again about the mountains," Sophia whispered, her small fingers tracing patterns on the hospital blanket. Her voice carried the weight of someone far older, someone who had seen too much of life's cruelty too soon. Michael's throat tightened. He had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, had seen men die in his arms, had carried the weight of impossible decisions across desert battlefields. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the helplessness of watching his daughter fight a war he couldn't join. "The mountains in Colorado, mija? Where we used to go camping." "Before I got sick," she nodded, her eyes drifting toward the window where snow began to fall in lazy spirals. "When we could run together." The contrast was cruel and absolute. Once Sophia had been a whirlwind of energy, racing through their backyard, her dark curls bouncing with each step. Now the simple act of sitting up required assistance. Michael's veteran's pension barely covered the mounting medical bills, and his ex-wife's insurance had reached its lifetime maximum months ago. They were drowning in debt, drowning in fear, drowning in the terrible mathematics of modern healthcare where a child's life was measured in co-payments and deductibles. "Mr. Torres?" A nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "The doctor wants to discuss Sophia's next treatment cycle." Michael squeezed his daughter's hand. "I'll be right back, baby." In the hallway, Dr. Patel's expression told the story before his words could. "The current protocol isn't showing the response we hoped for," he said quietly. "There are experimental treatments available, but they're not covered by insurance. We're looking at approximately $60,000 for the next phase." $60,000. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Michael's monthly disability check was $1,800. His savings account had been empty for months. "How long do we have to decide?" "I'd recommend we begin as soon as possible. Every week matters at this stage." That evening, Michael walked the empty corridors of the hospital, his footsteps echoing off sterile walls. Through the windows he watched the city below, millions of people going about their lives, while his daughters slipped away one cell at a time. He thought about his squad in Afghanistan, about the sacred promise they'd made to leave no one behind. But how do you rescue someone from an enemy you can't see, can't fight, can't defeat with courage or superior firepower? The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty at this hour, fluorescent lights humming overhead like mechanical prayers. Michael sat with lukewarm coffee, staring at loan applications he couldn't qualify for, charity forms that required months of processing time Sophia didn't have. Outside, the snow continued to fall, each flake a tiny reminder of how beautiful and fragile everything could be. A young orderly, barely out of his teens, wiped down nearby tables with methodical precision. "Rough night?" he asked quietly. Michael looked up, surprised by the kindness in the kid's voice. "My daughter," he said simply. "She's fighting leukemia." The orderly nodded, his movements pausing. "I see a lot of families here. The ones who make it through. They're usually the ones who don't give up hope, even when everything looks impossible." Hope. The word felt foreign in Michael's mouth, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. By morning, the snow had transformed Chicago into something almost beautiful, softening the harsh edges of reality with a blanket of white that couldn't quite hide the pain beneath. Michael's truck, a 15-year-old Ford with over 200,000 miles, struggled to start in the parking garage. The engine turned over reluctantly, coughing like an old man with too many cigarettes in his past. He had exactly $37 in his wallet and a quarter tank of gas. Sophia's medicine alone cost more than his monthly rent. The experimental treatment might as well have been on another planet. But he had promised her they would go home for Christmas, had promised her she would see the mountains again, and Michael Torres had never broken a promise to his daughter. The drive through downtown Chicago revealed a city divided by invisible lines. Glass towers stretched toward gray sky, filled with people who would spend more on lunch than Michael had to his name. At street level, the homeless moved like ghosts between doorways and subway grates, seeking warmth that always seemed just out of reach. At a red light, Michael watched a businessman hurry past a hunched figure in a worn military jacket. The homeless man's cardboard sign was barely legible through the falling snow. Veteran. Anything helps. God bless. Something about the way he held himself, shoulders squared despite the cold, eyes forward despite the rejection, reminded Michael of men he'd served with. Men who had come home to find that heroism didn't transfer well to civilian life, that the skills that kept you alive in war were often useless in peace. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from his ex-wife, Jennifer. Doctor called. Says we need to decide about treatment by Friday. Insurance company denied the appeal. Again. Friday was tomorrow. The mathematical cruelty of the situation hit him like shrapnel. 6 days a week he worked construction when his back allowed it, earning just enough to keep the lights on and gas in the tank. Sundays he spent entirely at the hospital, reading to Sophia, helping her with school assignments she was too weak to complete, pretending that everything would be okay. But the numbers didn't lie. $60,000 was as unreachable as the moon. His phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Torres, this is Janet from Children's Hospital Billing Department. I'm calling about your account. You're currently 60 days past due on... Michael hung up. Through his windshield, the homeless veteran was still there, still holding his sign, still invisible to the river of people flowing around him. The light turned green, but Michael didn't move. Behind him, horns began to honk, but he was thinking about promises and impossible mathematics, about a little girl who believed her daddy could fix anything, about men who had fought for their country and been forgotten by it. What do you do when the enemy is poverty and the battlefield is a hospital room? What do you do when your child's life hangs in the balance and the only weapon you have is love, which turns out to be not nearly enough? The homeless veteran looked up, their eyes meeting through the windshield for just a moment. In that instant, Michael saw something he recognized, the particular exhaustion that comes from carrying invisible wounds, the quiet dignity of someone who had given everything and received nothing in return. The man nodded slightly, a soldier's acknowledgement passing between them across the distance of falling snow. That evening, Michael sat beside Sophia's bed as she slept, her breathing shallow but steady. Her fingers were curled around a small stuffed elephant he had won for her at a county fair 3 summers ago, back when their biggest worry was whether it would rain during their camping trip. On the nightstand, get-well cards from her classmates created a paper garden of hope and crayon drawings of rainbows and sunshine. But outside the window, the real world continued its relentless march. Bills accumulated like snowdrifts. Time ran out like sand through fingers. And somewhere in the city, a homeless veteran sat in a doorway, as forgotten and invisible as Michael's hope was becoming. Thursday evening painted the sky the color of old brass, and Michael's shift at the construction site had ended early due to the weather. His supervisor, a gruff man named Pete who had never served but respected those who had, slipped him an envelope before he left. From the guys, Pete said simply. Inside was $340 in crumpled bills and a note. For Sophia. From her construction family. The gesture broke something open in Michael's chest, a dam of emotion he had been holding back for months. These men, who worked with calloused hands for wages barely above minimum, had given what they could. It wouldn't cover Sophia's treatment. Wouldn't even cover a single day in the hospital, but it was everything they had to offer, and that made it precious beyond measure. Driving back toward the hospital, Michael took a detour through downtown. He told himself it was to avoid traffic, but his hand seemed to steer the truck toward the intersection where he had seen the homeless veteran. The man was still there, though the crowd had thinned as office workers retreated to warm homes and families. Michael parked illegally at a loading zone and walked over. Up close, he could see the details that distance had hidden. The carefully maintained military bearing despite the worn clothes, the Marine Corps tattoo barely visible beneath a frayed sleeve, the eyes that held stories no one wanted to hear. "Semper Fi," Michael said quietly. The man looked up, surprised. "Army?" "Staff Sergeant Torres, 3 tours Afghanistan. Lance Corporal Washington, 2 tours Iraq." The man's voice carried the particular rhythm of someone who had spent long stretches in silence. "How'd you know?" "Takes one to know one." Michael sat down on the cold concrete beside him, ignoring the stares of passing pedestrians. "How long you been out here?" Washington shrugged. "Year and a half, maybe 2. Time gets fluid." He gestured toward the street. "Most folks, they see the uniform, they think hero. But heroes don't end up sitting on sidewalks, right? So maybe we were never heroes at all." "That's bullshit and you know it." For the first time, Washington smiled. "Yeah, maybe. But knowing it and feeling it are different countries sometimes." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 soldiers who understood that some experiences created bonds that transcended circumstances. The snow continued to fall, and Michael thought about Sophia, about promises, about the strange mathematics of sacrifice that seemed to govern everything. "You got family?" Washington asked. Michael pulled out his phone, showed him Sophia's picture from before she got sick, a little girl with her father's eyes and her mother's stubborn smile, standing in front of a Christmas tree that seemed to glow with joy. "My daughter. She's in the hospital. Leukemia." Washington studied the photo with the careful attention military men learn to give to important intelligence. "She's beautiful, looks strong." "She is. Stronger than me." Michael's voice caught slightly. "I can't help her. Not the way she needs. There's this treatment, but it costs." He shook his head. "Doesn't matter what it costs. I don't have it." "How much?" The question came so simply, so directly, that Michael answered without thinking. 60,000. Washington nodded as if this was information he needed to process to file away for future reference. "That's a lot of money. More than I'll see in 5 years." They watched the city move around them, people hurrying past with shopping bags and warm coats, with lives that seemed impossibly stable and secure. Michael thought about fairness, about why some children got sick while others didn't, about why some veterans came home to parades while others came home to silence. "I got something to show you," Washington said finally. From his jacket, he pulled out a photograph so creased and worn that the faces were barely visible. "My unit, Fallujah, 2005. He pointed to figures that had become ghosts of themselves through handling. "Jenkins, Rodriguez, Thompson, me. We made a pact. If any of us ever needed anything, really needed it, the others would be there." "What happened to them?" "Jenkins died in that same firefight where this photo got taken. Rodriguez came home, got married, moved to Oregon, has 3 kids now. Thompson." Washington's voice trailed off. "Thompson struggled like me. Couldn't find his place. Put a gun in his mouth 2 years ago." Michael felt the familiar weight of survivor's guilt, the question that haunted every veteran who had made it home. Why me and not them? "Point is," Washington continued, "we all had different wars after the war. But that promise we made, it still means something, even if most of us are gone now." From his pocket, Washington pulled out a small cloth bag, the kind used for jewelry or coins. His fingers worked at the drawstring with careful precision. "I've been carrying this around for 8 years, never spent a penny of it." Inside the bag were medals, a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star, several service ribbons. But underneath the medals was something else, a thick roll of bills held together with a rubber band. Combat pay, Washington said quietly. Hazard pay. Every dollar I earned in country. I've been saving it for... Hell, I don't know what I've been saving it for. Maybe for something that mattered. Michael stared at the money, understanding and disbelief warring in his mind. I can't take that. Why not? Because it's yours. You earned it. You need it. Washington laughed, but there was no humor in it. Need it for what? For another night in a doorway? For another bottle to help me sleep? For another day of being invisible? He pressed the roll of bills into Michael's hands. Your little girl, she's still fighting. Me, I've been done fighting for a long time. The money felt impossibly heavy, warm from Washington's pocket. Michael tried to push it back, but the Marine's grip was firm. This is everything you have. No, Washington said quietly. This is everything I had. What I have now is a reason to give it away. The money totaled exactly $63,000, $3 more than Sophia needed for her treatment. Michael sat in his truck outside the hospital at dawn, the bills spread across his passenger seat like fallen leaves, each one representing days and weeks of Washington's life in a war zone, each one earned with blood and sweat, and the particular courage required to get up each morning when getting up meant facing death. His hands shook as he counted it again, as if the numbers might change, as if this moment might dissolve into dream. But the money was real. The sacrifice was real. And somewhere in the city, a homeless Marine was waking up with nothing but the clothes on his back and a decision that had changed everything. Michael called Dr. Patel before the sun had fully risen. We can do the treatment, he said, his voice hoarse with emotion and possibility. We can start today. Mr. Torres? That's wonderful news. May I ask what changed? How do you explain that miracles sometimes come disguised as homeless veterans? How do you tell a doctor that your daughter's life was saved by a man most people walked past without seeing? I found a way, Michael said simply. Sophia was still sleeping when he entered her room, but she stirred as he sat beside her bed. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to consciousness with the careful deliberation of someone whose body had learned to ration energy. Morning, mija. Daddy? Her voice was soft, questioning. You look different. Different how? She studied his face with the penetrating honesty of children. Like you're not scared anymore. The observation hit him like a physical blow. He had tried so hard to hide his fear from her, to project strength and confidence when inside he was drowning. But children see everything, feel everything, absorb the emotional weather of adults like sponges. I'm still scared, he admitted, but now I'm scared and hopeful at the same time. Dr. Patel arrived with a team of nurses and the particular energy that medical professionals bring when there is finally something concrete to do, something besides waiting and watching. The experimental treatment would begin immediately, a combination of targeted therapy and immunotherapy that had shown promising results in clinical trials. The process will take several weeks, Dr. Patel explained as nurses prepared IV lines and monitors. There may be side effects and we'll need to monitor her closely, but the early indicators suggest this approach could be very effective for Sophia's particular case. As the treatment began flowing into his daughter's veins, Michael held her hand and told her about the mountains in Colorado, about camping trips they would take when she was stronger, about all the places they would go and things they would see. But mostly he told her about a Marine named Washington who had given them the gift of possibility. Will I meet him? Sophia asked. I hope so, baby. I really hope so. But when Michael returned to downtown the next day, Washington was gone. The doorway where he had spent months was empty except for a few scattered newspapers and the memory of sacrifice. Michael asked at nearby businesses, at the shelter 3 blocks away, at the VA office, but no one had seen him. Lance Corporal Washington had vanished as completely as if he had never existed, leaving behind only the echo of his generosity and a small family's restored hope. Over the following weeks, as Sophia's treatment progressed and her strength slowly returned, Michael continued to search. He drove through the city during his lunch breaks, walked the streets after work, posted messages on veteran forums and social media pages. He wanted to tell Washington that Sophia was responding to the treatment, that her blood counts were improving, that her laughter was beginning to sound like music again instead of fragile glass. But perhaps that was Washington's final gift, not just the money, but the understanding that some acts of grace are meant to be anonymous, that some sacrifices are given without expectation of recognition or reward. Maybe he was out there somewhere, finally at peace with his decision. Maybe he had found his own path to healing, or maybe he had simply moved on to help someone else who needed a miracle disguised as generosity. 2 months later, Sophia's latest blood test showed something that made Dr. Patel smile for the first time since Michael had met him. Remission, he said quietly. Complete remission. The word hung in the air like a prayer answered, like a promise kept, like hope transformed into reality through the mysterious alchemy of human kindness. 6 months after that snowy December evening, Sophia Torres ran through a meadow in the Colorado Rockies, her laughter echoing off mountain peaks that had waited patiently for her return. Her hair had grown back thicker and darker than before, and her cheeks held the color of a child who had remembered how to be fearless. Michael watched from their campsite, tears streaming down his face as he witnessed the resurrection of his daughter's joy. In his pocket he carried a worn photograph, not of Washington, whom he never found, but of Sophia on the day her treatment ended, holding a sign she had made. "Thank you, Marine friend, wherever you are." The story of Lance Corporal Washington and Staff Sergeant Torres never made the news. There were no cameras to capture the moment when one broken soldier saved another soldier's broken heart. There was no parade, no ceremony, no medal for the homeless Marine who had given everything so that a little girl could run in meadows and laugh at mountains. But in the space between heartbeats, in the pause between one breath and the next, miracles still happen. They happen in doorways and hospital rooms between strangers who recognize something essential in each other's eyes. They happen when we choose to see the invisible, to honor the forgotten, to believe that every person carries within them the capacity for extraordinary grace. Sometimes miracles look like medical breakthroughs or lottery tickets or divine intervention. But sometimes they look like a homeless veteran counting out his last dollars to save a child he has never met, asking for nothing in return except the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sacrifice still means something in a world that often forgets the price of its freedom. Sophia Torres runs free now, her future stretching before her like an endless summer day. And somewhere, perhaps, a Marine named Washington walks with lighter steps, carrying the knowledge that his longest war finally ended not in defeat or victory, but in love. The kind of love that transforms everything it touches. The kind of love that proves we are all connected by threads stronger than steel and more precious than gold. In the end, that may be the only miracle any of us really need. The discovery that we are never truly alone, that somewhere in this vast and sometimes cruel world, there is always someone willing to carry us when we can no longer carry ourselves. All we have to do is remember to look, to see, to recognize the angels who walk among us disguised as ordinary people with extraordinary hearts.